30 days. That was all Grant gave her to vacate the home she had scrubbed, decorated, and loved for 5 years. He sat across the mahogany table, smirking as he slid a check for $500 toward her, a generous severance for a wife he claimed brought nothing to the table. He thought Mara was just a broke orphan he had rescued from a diner. He had no idea that the man stepping out of the blacked-out Rolls-Royce outside the courthouse wasn't just her lawyer. He was the CEO of the very company Grant was desperate to merge with. And he wasn't happy. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall. It felt like it was trying to erase the city. It hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse apartment in the Spire building, blurring the lights of the Space Needle into grey smudges. Inside, the atmosphere was colder than the storm. Mara stood by the kitchen island, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the granite countertop. She was wearing the same faded cardigan she'd bought at a Goodwill 3 years ago. Across from her, Grant sat on the Italian leather sofa, looking immaculate in a tailored suit that cost more than Mara had spent on herself in their entire 5-year marriage. "It's simple math, Mara," Grant said, not even looking up from his iPad. He took a sip of his scotch, a Macallan 25 that he forbade her from touching. "I brought the assets, I brought the house, I brought the lifestyle. You brought domestic support, which frankly, I could have hired a service for." Mara felt a lump form in her throat, hot and sharp. "Domestic support? Grant, I nursed you through your surgery last year. I managed your mother's hospice care when you were too busy networking. I built this home." Grant let out a dry, dismissive chuckle. He stood up, walking over to the safe, hidden behind a painting in his office alcove. He spun the dial, the clicks echoing in the silent apartment. He pulled out a single, crisp envelope. "You decorated, Mara. You didn't build." He tossed the envelope onto the island. It slid across the marble and stopped inches from her hand. "That is a check for $5,000. Consider it a severance package. It's more than you deserve, considering you signed the prenup." The prenup. The document she had signed blindly, 5 years ago, when she was 22, and so blindly in love she would have signed a death warrant if Grant had asked. She had believed him when he said it was just standard procedure for business owners. "I don't want your money, Grant," Mara whispered, her voice cracking. "I want to know why." "Why now? Was it something I did?" Grant sighed, looking bored. He checked his Rolex. "We've outgrown each other. I need a partner who understands the world I operate in. Someone with pedigree. You're a sweet girl, Mara. But let's be honest. You're a waitress I picked up because you looked good in an apron. Now, I'm finalizing a merger with Ellington Global. I need a wife who can host a gala, not one who worries about coupon clipping." He didn't mention Kylie. He didn't have to. Mara had seen the texts on his phone last week. Kylie, the 24-year-old marketing intern at his firm, the one with the pedigree he apparently craved. "You have 30 days to vacate," Grant said, turning his back to her to pour another drink. "But honestly, I'd prefer if you were gone by the weekend. I have decorators coming in next Monday to refresh the place." Refresh. Erase. He wanted to erase her. Mara looked at the check. $5,000 to start a new life in one of the most expensive cities in America. She looked at Grant's broad back, the man she had devoted herself to. She realized then that he didn't hate her. It was worse. He was indifferent to her. To him, she was just an old piece of furniture that no longer matched the drapes. "Keep the check," Mara said. Her voice was suddenly steady. Grant paused, glass halfway to his mouth. He turned an amused eyebrow raised. "Excuse me?" "I said keep it. I don't want your severance, Grant. I'm not your employee." "Suit yourself," Grant laughed, snatching the check back. "More for the decorators. Just make sure your key is on the counter when you leave." Mara walked to the guest room. She had been sleeping there for weeks anyway, and began to pack. She didn't take the designer bags he had bought her for appearances. She didn't take the jewelry he insisted she wear at company dinners. She took only what she came with: her old clothes, her books, and a small, battered wooden box she kept locked in the bottom drawer. As she zipped up her duffel bag, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unsaved number, but she knew who it was. "Heard the news. Are you ready to come home yet, or are you still playing commoner?" Mara stared at the screen. She typed back a single word: "Soon." She walked out of the penthouse 10 minutes later. She didn't say goodbye. Grant didn't even look up from his iPad as the elevator doors slid shut. He thought he had just discarded a burden. He had no idea he had just declared war on the only family member of the Ellington dynasty he had ever met. The Motel 6 on the outskirts of Tacoma smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon pledge. It was a far cry from the penthouse, but to Mara it felt strangely like freedom. For 3 days, she sat on the lumpy mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper. She needed to process the grief before she could embrace the anger. She had loved Grant. That was the humiliating truth. She had loved him not for his money. God knew she didn't need it. But because she thought he was a self-made man who valued hard work. She had been wrong. Grant wasn't self-made. He was a climber, and climbers only cared about the next rung on the ladder. On the 4th morning, Mara woke up with a clarity that cut through the depression. She showered, put on her best pair of jeans and a white blouse, and drove her 10-year-old Honda Civic to a local coffee shop. She opened her laptop and began to research. Grant's company, Apex Logistics. Current status: pending acquisition by Ellington Global. Stock value: high, based on merger rumors. Grant was banking everything on this merger. Ellington Global was the whale every logistics company in the Pacific Northwest wanted to catch. If the deal went through, Grant would net nearly $40 million personally and secure a VP position within the Ellington hierarchy. Mara took a sip of her black coffee. It was bitter, just the way she liked it. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. It rang once. "Mara?" The voice on the other end was deep, authoritative, but laced with a softness that only she ever heard. "Hi, Preston," she said. There was a pause. Then, the sound of a chair scraping back as if he had stood up abruptly. "Where are you? I've had security tracking your phone, but you disabled the GPS on the Civic. If you're in trouble, I'll have a team there in 5 minutes." "I'm safe," Mara said. "I'm in Tacoma." "Tacoma? Good Lord, Mara. Why? The estate in the Hamptons is empty. The flat in London is ready. Why are you in a motel in Tacoma?" "I got divorced, Preston." Silence stretched over the line. "Grant?" "Yes." "Did he hurt you?" The tone of Preston's voice dropped an octave. It wasn't a question of concern. It was a threat assessment. Preston Ellington, CEO of Ellington Global, didn't make idle threats. He made business decisions, and he removed liabilities. "Not physically," Mara said. "He just discarded me. He told me I brought nothing to the table. He gave me 30 days to move out and offered me $5,000. Preston let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a terrifying sound. $5,000? For you? He thinks I'm poor, Preston. Remember? That was the deal. I wanted to see if he loved me for me. I never told him who I was. I never told him I'm an Ellington. And the verdict? He loves the lifestyle, Mara said, looking out the window at the rain. He loves pedigree. He's actually dumping me to make himself look better for the Ellington merger. He thinks being single or having a high-status wife will impress the board. He's dumping you to impress me? Preston asked, the irony dripping from his voice. Essentially. He has a meeting with the Ellington acquisition team next Friday, doesn't he? He does. I wasn't planning on attending personally. It's a mid-level acquisition for us. But I can clear my schedule. Don't, Mara said quickly. Not yet. I want to handle this my way. He served me with papers. He wants a quick, quiet divorce. He has a shark of a lawyer named Vance, who specializes in bullying low-income spouses into submission. They think I can't afford legal counsel. I will send you the entire legal department, Preston growled. No, I need something specific. I need a lawyer who looks like a shark but answers to us. And I need you to let the merger talks proceed. Let him think he's winning. Let him think he's the king of the world. Mara, Preston warned, revenge is messy. It's not revenge, Preston, Mara said, closing her laptop. It's karma. He told me to leave with nothing. I just want to make sure everyone knows exactly what nothing looks like. Fine, Preston sighed. What do you need? I need a suit. I need a car. And I need you to show up at the final divorce hearing. It's in 3 weeks. I'll be there, Preston promised. And Mara. Yeah? Welcome back. The next 3 weeks were a blur of calculated silence. Grant sent several emails through his lawyer, Vance, demanding she sign the uncontested divorce papers. He threatened to sue her for emotional distress if she dragged it out. He even had the audacity to text her once. Just sign them, Mara. Don't make this ugly. You can't afford ugly. Mara didn't reply. She stayed in the motel, but her days were spent very differently. A courier arrived at the Motel 6, 2 days after her call with Preston. He drove a nondescript sedan, but the garment bag he handed her was stamped with the logo of a private tailor on Savile Row. Inside was a charcoal grey power suit, tailored to her exact measurements from the file Ellington Global kept on all family members. Along with the suit came a black Amex Centurion card. The black card. No limit. Mara held the heavy titanium card in her hand. For 5 years, she had clipped coupons. She had argued with Grant over the price of organic eggs. She had worn shoes until the soles wore through, because Grant said they needed to reinvest in the business. She drove to a dealership in Bellevue. Not just any dealership, a specific luxury import lot that Grant often drooled over, but couldn't quite afford to buy from directly. She walked in wearing her old jeans and cardigan. A salesman, a young guy named Trent, who looked like he measured his self-worth in hair gel, barely glanced at her. "Restrooms in the back, honey," he said, not looking up from his phone. "I'm here to buy," Mara said. Trent looked her up and down, smirking. "We don't sell used Civics here. The cheapest thing on this lot is 80 grand. Maybe try the Kia dealership down the road." Mara didn't blink. She pulled the black card from her pocket and tapped it on his desk. The metallic clink was heavy. Trent's eyes widened. He knew what that card was. You didn't work in luxury cars without knowing what a Centurion card looked like. "I want the G-Wagon," she said, pointing to the matte black Mercedes G63 AMG in the showroom window, the one with the red interior, "and I want it delivered to the courthouse on 4th Avenue 3 weeks from today at 9 a.m. sharp." Trent scrambled to his feet, his phone clattering to the desk. "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, ma'am. Would you like a cappuccino while we do the paperwork?" "No," Mara said. "I want you to understand that if this car is 1 minute late, I will buy this dealership and fire you." Trent swallowed hard. It will be there. As Mara walked out, she felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't happiness. It was the cold, hard armor of the Ellington legacy locking into place. Grant wanted a woman with power? He was about to meet one. Meanwhile, Grant was living his best life. Or so he thought. He sat in the corner office of Apex Logistics, looking out at the shipping yard below. Kylie was sitting on the edge of his desk, scrolling through wedding venues on her iPad. "What about Napa?" she asked, popping gum. "Or maybe Lake Como. Since the merger is practically a done deal, we can afford it, right?" "We can afford whatever we want, babe," Grant said, grinning. "Vance tells me Mara hasn't even responded to the papers. That means she defaults. She's probably too scared to even show up to court. We'll get the judgment by default. She gets 0, and I keep the house, the cars, and the stock options." "She was such a drag," Kylie giggled. "Always wearing those awful sweaters. I don't know how you stood it." "She was convenient," Grant shrugged. "But she's the past. Ellington Global is the future. I have the final meeting with their acquisitions VP tomorrow. Once that ink is dry, I'm not just a business owner. I'm an executive." His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Grant, Mr. Vance is on line 1. Grant picked up. "Vance, tell me she signed." "She didn't sign." Vance's voice was raspy, the voice of a man who smoked too much and slept too little. "But she did file a response. Today. Just before the deadline." "And?" Grant asked, annoyed. "What is she asking for? Half the furniture? The Honda?" "No," Vance said slowly. "She's not asking for assets. She's contesting the validity of the prenup based on fraudulent inducement, and she's filed a motion for a full financial audit of Apex Logistics." Grant froze. "An audit? She can't do that. That will stall the merger. If Ellington hears we're being audited during a divorce, they'll pull out." "I know," Vance said. "And she hired a lawyer." "Who?" Grant demanded. "Some legal aid loser?" "No," Vance said. "Arthur Penhaligon." Grant dropped the phone. Arthur Penhaligon wasn't just a lawyer. He was the lawyer. He was the man politicians called when they got caught with a dead girl. He was the man Fortune 500 companies called when they were accused of poisoning a river. He cost $2,000 an hour, and he didn't take cases he couldn't win. "How?" Grant whispered to the dial tone. "How the hell did she afford Penhaligon?" The panic in Grant's chest was a cold, hard knot. He paced the length of his office, the skyline of Seattle mocking him with its stability. "It has to be a mistake," Kylie said from the couch, filing her nails. "Or maybe a charity case. Lawyers do that, right? Pro bono." "Arthur Penhaligon doesn't do pro bono," Grant snapped, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "He charges for every breath he takes. If Mara has him, someone is funding her. But who? She has no family. She has no friends with that kind of money. She's a nobody." He stopped pacing and looked at Kylie. For the first time, her youth and nonchalance didn't look appealing. They looked like liability. "I need you to leave, Kylie. I have work to do." "But we have dinner reservations at—" "I said get out!" Grant roared. Kylie flinched, grabbed her purse, and scrambled out the door. Grant didn't watch her go. He was already dialing Vance. "Fix this," Grant hissed into the phone. "I don't care what it costs. Get the audit stopped. If Ellington Global catches wind that my books are being opened up in a messy divorce, the deal is dead. And if the deal dies, I'm dead." "I'm filing a motion to quash the subpoena," Vance said, sounding less confident than usual. "But Grant, you need to know. Penhaligon sent over a discovery list. It's not just business records. They want your personal communications, texts, emails, GPS data from the last 2 years." Grant went pale. The texts to Kylie, the emails to his buddies bragging about how he was upgrading his wife. If that got out, the fraudulent inducement claim that he had married Mara under false pretenses or was hiding assets might actually stick. "Make it go away," Grant whispered, "or you're fired." 2 days later, Grant decided to take matters into his own hands. Lawyers were blunt instruments. Grant prided himself on being a scalpel. He knew Mara. He knew her buttons. She was soft-hearted. She hated conflict. If he could just get her alone, he could manipulate her back into submission. He tracked her down not to the Motel 6, he wouldn't be caught dead there, but to a small diner in downtown Tacoma where he knew she liked the pie. It was a pathetic place, the kind with sticky tables and waitresses who called you on. He walked in, the bell on the door jingling. The smell of frying grease hit him, making his nose wrinkle. He spotted her in a back booth, reading a hardcover book. She looked different. He expected to see her eyes red from crying. He expected the slumped shoulders of a defeated woman. Instead, Mara was sitting upright. She was wearing a simple white blouse, but the cut was sharp. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon. She looked composed. Dangerous. Grant slid into the booth across from her without asking. Mara didn't jump. She slowly marked her page and closed the book. She looked at him with eyes that were perfectly dry. "Grant," she said. Not "Hi, Grant," or "What are you doing here?" Just his name, a statement of fact. "Mara," he put on his best sympathetic smile, the one he used on clients when he was overcharging them. "Look at you, staying in this place. It breaks my heart." "The pie is excellent," she said calmly. "What do you want?" "I want to help you," Grant said, leaning in. "Vance tells me you've hired Penhaligon. That's a mistake, honey. He's going to bleed you dry. Whoever lent you the money for his retainer is going to own you for the rest of your life." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a new envelope. "I've been thinking. 5,000 was hasty. I was stressed. I want to make it right." He slid the envelope across the sticky table. "There's $50,000 in there. Cashier's check, and I'll let you keep the Honda. No questions asked. All you have to do is fire Penhaligon and sign the original agreement." Mara looked at the envelope. For a second, Grant thought he had her. 50 grand was a fortune to a waitress. It was life-changing money for someone like her. Then she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a trap. "You're terrified," she said softly. Grant blinked. "What?" "You're not here because you care. You're here because the Ellington merger is in the due diligence phase. You know that if they see a forensic audit of your company, they'll find the offshore accounts you set up in the Caymans last year, the ones you didn't declare in our prenup." Grant felt the blood drain from his face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Asset hiding is a felony, Grant," Mara continued, her voice light, conversational. "And it definitely voids a prenup. Arthur is very excited about it. He calls it a slam dunk." "You have nothing," Grant snarled, his mask slipping. "You're a waitress. You're nothing." Mara picked up the envelope with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. She dropped it on the floor. "I don't want your money, Grant. I have my own now. I'll see you in court." "You're making a mistake." Grant stood up, his fists clenched. People in the diner were starting to stare. "You're going against a man who is about to become royalty in this city. When I merge with Ellington, I will bury you." Mara looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "You really want to be part of the Ellington family, don't you?" "It's where I belong," Grant sneered. "Be careful what you wish for," Mara said. She opened her book and began reading again. Grant stormed out, kicking the door open. He felt a shiver down his spine. For the first time in 5 years, he wasn't sure he was the smartest person in the room. The conference room at Penhaligon's law firm was intimidating by design. It was all glass, steel, and silence. The table was long enough to land a plane on. Grant sat on one side, flanked by Vance and a junior associate. He was sweating, though the room was climate-controlled to a crisp 68 degrees. On the other side sat Mara. Next to her was Arthur Penhaligon. Arthur was a small man in his 60s, with silver hair and spectacles that looked like they cost more than Grant's car. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like a kindly grandfather. But Grant knew better. He had read the man's bio. Arthur Penhaligon destroyed lives for a living. "Let's begin," Arthur said, his voice soft. The court reporter's fingers began to fly across her stenograph. The deposition was brutal. It wasn't about the money at first. It was about the marriage. "Mr. Grant," Arthur said, looking at a file. "On the night of October 14th, you sent a text message to a Miss Kylie Silver." "Do you recall that message?" Vance interjected. "Objection, relevance. This is a no-fault state. Infidelity is irrelevant to asset division." Arthur smiled. "It goes to character and credibility, specifically regarding the timeline of asset hiding. I'll allow the witness to answer." Grant gritted his teeth. "I don't recall." Arthur slid a paper across the table. "You wrote, 'Don't worry, babe. The cow is almost out to pasture. I just need to move the liquidity to the shell company before I serve her papers.'" Arthur paused. The silence was deafening. "Who is the cow, Mr. Grant?" Grant stared at Mara. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking out the window, looking bored. "My wife," Grant mumbled. "And the shell company? Would that be Apex Holdings Limited, registered in the Cayman Islands?" Grant's head snapped toward Vance. Vance looked sick. They hadn't told anyone about Apex Holdings. How did they know? "I assert my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination," Grant stammered. Arthur chuckled. "This is a civil deposition, Mr. Grant. You can plead the Fifth, but the judge is allowed to draw a negative inference from it. Meaning, if you don't answer, the court assumes the worst. So let's try again. Did you move $3 million of company assets into that account 2 weeks before filing for divorce?" Grant felt like the walls were closing in. If he admitted it, he admitted to fraud. If he denied it, they clearly had proof, and he would be committing perjury. "We need a recess," Vance said, standing up abruptly. "Denied," Arthur said calmly. "We're on the record. Sit down." The next 2 hours were a dismantling. Arthur walked Grant through every insult, every hidden dime, every lie. He exposed the fact that Grant had used marital funds to buy Kylie jewelry. He exposed the fact that Grant had undervalued the company in the initial divorce filing by 40%. By the end of it, Grant was slumped in his chair, tie loosened, sweat staining his armpits. "One last question," Arthur said, closing his folder. "You stated in your filing that your wife contributed nothing to the marriage. Is that correct?" "Yes," Grant said defiantly. "She didn't work. She didn't bring in clients. She was a housewife. And you are aware that she is the one who introduced you to the vice president of logistics at Ellington Global 3 years ago at a charity mixer. The introduction that started this whole merger process?" Grant frowned. She bumped into him. It was an accident. She spilled a drink on him. Was it? Arthur raised an eyebrow. Or did she facilitate a connection that made you millions? "She's a waitress," Grant shouted, losing his temper. "She doesn't know how to facilitate anything. She got lucky." Mara turned her head slowly. Her eyes locked onto Grant's. "I didn't get lucky, Grant," she said. Her voice was low, but it carried across the room. "I got you a meeting. I got you the contract. I built you, and you never even noticed." "We're done here," Vance said, grabbing Grant's arm and practically dragging him out of the room. As they stumbled into the hallway, Grant pulled away. "They know about the Cayman's account, Vance. How do they know?" "I don't know," Vance hissed. "Penhaligon is plugged in. He has resources. Look, we have to settle. We have to give her what she wants. Half. Maybe 60%. "No!" Grant slammed his fist against the wall. "If I give her half, I lose majority control of Apex. If I lose control, Ellington won't merge. I lose everything." "Then what do you want to do?" "We speed it up," Grant said, a manic look in his eyes. "The merger meeting is Friday. If I sign the deal with Ellington before the divorce is finalized, the assets merge. It becomes too complicated to untangle. Ellington's legal team will crush her to protect their new asset." "That's risky," Vance warned. "If Ellington finds out you're under active litigation—" "They won't," Grant said. "I'm meeting the big boss himself on Friday. Preston Ellington. He's flying in. I'll charm him. I'll sign the deal. Once I'm under the Ellington umbrella, Mara can't touch me." Grant straightened his tie. He felt a surge of adrenaline. It was a Hail Mary, but it was all he had. He had no idea that the meeting with Preston Ellington wasn't his salvation. It was his execution. Friday came with a storm. Thunder rattled the windows of the Ellington Global Headquarters in downtown Seattle. Grant stood in the waiting room of the executive suite, checking his reflection in the glass. He looked perfect. Navy suit, power tie, polished Oxfords. He had rehearsed his pitch 1,000 times. "Mr. Ellington will see you now," a severe-looking assistant said. Grant took a deep breath and walked through the double mahogany doors. The office was massive. It smelled of old money, leather, teak, and pipe tobacco. Behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a galleon sat Preston Ellington. Grant had only seen photos of him. In person, the man was terrifying. He was broad-shouldered, with eyes that looked like chips of flint. He didn't smile. He didn't stand up to shake hands. "Mr. Grant," Preston said. His voice was a low rumble. "Mr. Ellington?" Grant put on his 1,000-watt smile, walking forward. "It is an honor to finally meet the man behind the empire." "Sit," Preston commanded. Grant sat. "My team tells me your logistics numbers are impressive," Preston said, flipping through a file. "Your routes are efficient. Your margins are high." "We run a tight ship," Grant said confidently. "Efficiency is my religion." "Is it?" Preston looked up. "And what about loyalty? Is that a religion of yours?" Grant paused. It was an odd question. "Of course, loyalty to the company is paramount." "I'm not talking about the company," Preston said. He closed the file. "I'm talking about character. You see, Mr. Grant, Ellington Global is a family business. We don't just acquire companies. We acquire people. We need to know that the men we bring into our fold are men of honor." "I assure you," Grant said, placing a hand on his chest. "My reputation is spotless." "Really?" Preston leaned back. "So if I were to ask your wife about your honor, what would she say?" Grant froze. Why was he asking about Mara? "My wife and I are separating," Grant said smoothly. "It's amicable. Sad, but necessary. We simply grew apart." "Amicable?" Preston repeated. "So you didn't say, tell her she brought nothing to the table? You didn't give her 30 days to vacate her own home? You aren't currently trying to hide $3 million in the Cayman Islands to avoid giving her a fair settlement?" Grant's mouth fell open. The air left the room. I don't know where you heard that, sir, but that is simply malicious gossip. My wife is a bitter woman. She's trying to sabotage this deal." "Is she?" Preston's eyes narrowed. "Yes. She's a nobody, Mr. Ellington. A waitress I picked up. She doesn't understand business. She's just looking for a payday." Preston stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached for the intercom on his desk. "Send her in." The heavy mahogany doors behind Grant opened. Grant turned around, expecting to see a lawyer, or maybe Kylie. Instead, Mara walked in. But it wasn't the Mara from the diner, and it certainly wasn't the Mara from the kitchen. She was wearing a dress that cost more than Grant's car. Diamonds glittered at her throat. Ellington heirlooms. She walked with a grace and power that filled the room. She didn't look at Grant. She walked straight past him, around the massive desk, and stood next to Preston. Preston Ellington stood up then. He placed a protective hand on Mara's shoulder. "Mr. Grant," Preston said, his voice ice cold, "I believe you know my sister." Grant's brain stopped working. He looked from Preston to Mara, the same eyes, the same jawline. The realization hit him like a freight train. "Sister," he whispered. "Mara Ellington," Preston said. She wanted to make it on her own. She wanted to find a man who loved her for her, not her name. She thought she found that in you. Preston's grip on Mara's shoulder tightened. She was wrong. Mara looked down at Grant. He was trembling in his chair, a small, pathetic man in a big, expensive suit. "I tried to tell you, Grant," Mara said softly. "I told you I brought things to the table. You just never bothered to look under the tablecloth." "But the merger," Grant stammered, looking at Preston. "The deal. We're practically partners." Preston picked up the merger contract from his desk. He held it up so Grant could see the cover page. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he tore it in half. "There is no merger," Preston said. "There never was. I kept the talks going for one reason, to keep you distracted while Mara's lawyers found every dirty cent you tried to hide." He dropped the torn paper onto the desk. "Get out of my office," Preston said, "and get a good lawyer. You're going to need one." The elevator ride down from the 45th floor of Ellington Tower felt like a descent into hell. Grant leaned against the brushed steel wall, his breath fogging the metal. His hands were shaking so violently he couldn't even grip his phone to unlock it. "Sister." The word bounced around his skull like a ricocheting bullet. Mara wasn't just a nobody. She was an Ellington. She was part of the family that practically owned the logistics infrastructure of the Western Hemisphere. And he had treated her like hired help. He had thrown $500 at a woman whose family likely tipped more than that for dinner. When the elevator doors dinged open in the lobby, Grant stumbled out. The security guards who had looked at him with respect when he entered now watched him with impassive, stony glares. They knew. In the Ellington world, information traveled faster than light. He was no longer a guest. He was a trespasser. He burst out into the rainy Seattle afternoon. He didn't have an umbrella. He stood on the curb, water soaking into his expensive Italian wool suit, ruining it instantly. He fumbled for his keys, then realized he had valet parked. He waited 10 minutes for his car. When the valet finally brought his BMW around, the boy didn't open the door for him. He just tossed the keys to Grant and walked away. Grant got in, slammed the door, and screamed. A primal, guttural sound of pure rage and terror. He punched the steering wheel until his knuckles bruised. "Think, Grant, think," he muttered to himself, his eyes darting around the rain-slicked street. "She lied. That's it. She lied by omission. Fraud. I can sue her for fraud. She trapped me into a marriage under false pretenses." It was a delusional thought, a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. But he grabbed it. He started the car and peeled out into traffic, nearly sideswiping a taxi. He needed to get to Apex. He needed to rally the troops. If the merger was dead, he had to secure his existing contracts before Ellington pulled the plug on those too. Apex did 30% of its business as a subcontractor for Ellington Global. If they cut him off, his phone rang. It was Kylie. "Grant, oh my God!" Her voice was shrill, annoyed. "I'm at the bridal shop. The card declined. The black Amex." It declined. "Get out of the shop," Grant snapped, merging onto the highway aggressively. "What? No. I have the dress on. It's perfect. You need to call. The bank. It's embarrassing, Grant." "I said get out," Grant roared, the veins in his neck bulging. "The card declined because the accounts are probably frozen. The merger is off, Kylie. It's dead." There was a silence on the other end. "What do you mean, off?" "I mean Preston Ellington tore up the contract. I mean Mara is his sister. I mean we are in deep, deep trouble." "Mara is his sister?" Kylie's voice went flat. "Wait, does that mean she's rich?" "Yes, you idiot! She's worth hundreds of millions." "So you divorced a heiress for me?" Grant felt a cold spike in his gut. "Kylie, listen to me. I need you to go to the apartment, pack the valuables, the watches, the cash in the safe. We need liquidity." "Grant," Kylie said, her voice changing. It wasn't the voice of the doting girlfriend anymore. It was the voice of a rat sensing a sinking ship. "I think I'm going to stay at my mum's tonight." "What? No, I need you." "You needed a trophy," Kylie said coldly. "And it looks like you just threw away the real gold. Don't call me until you fix this." The line went dead. Grant threw the phone onto the passenger seat. "Fine!" he screamed at the empty car. "I don't need you. I don't need anyone." He skidded into the parking lot of Apex Logistics. He expected to see the bustling activity of his shipping yard, forklifts moving, trucks loading. Instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. He ran up the stairs to the main office, ignoring the receptionist who looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. He burst into the bullpen. Half the desks were empty. "Where is everyone?" Grant demanded, grabbing his operations manager, a guy named Steve. Steve pulled his arm away. "They walked, Grant, about an hour ago." "Walked? Why?" "We got a memo," Steve said, holding up a piece of paper. "From Ellington Global. They announced that any vendor currently employed by Apex Logistics is immediately blacklisted from future Ellington contracts. However, any individual employee who resigns from Apex by 5 p.m. today will be guaranteed an interview with Ellington HR. Grant snatched the paper. It was a kill order. Preston wasn't just suing him, he was poaching his staff. He was dismantling the company brick by brick. "You're staying, right, Steve?" Grant asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "I made you." Steve looked at the floor. "I have a mortgage, Grant, and my wife is expecting. Ellington offers full benefits and a signing bonus. I'm sorry." Steve picked up his box of personal belongings and walked out. Grant stood alone in the center of his empire. The phones were ringing off the hook, angry vendors, confused clients, but there was no one left to answer them. He walked into his office and collapsed into his chair. Omonzor looked at the view of the shipping yard. A massive Ellington Global freighter was moving through the Sound, a titan of industry. He had tried to fight a god, and the god had just stepped on him. His office phone rang, the private line. Only Vance had that number. Grant picked it up. "Tell me you have a plan, Vance." "I have a plan," Vance said. "I'm resigning as your counsel." Grant blinked. "You can't do that. We have court in 3 days." "I can and I am. Grant, you didn't tell me she was an Ellington. Do you know who Arthur Penhaligon is? He's the legal equivalent of a nuclear strike. He just sent me a file regarding your Cayman accounts. He has everything. The wire transfers, the IP addresses, the shell company registrations. He's going to refer this to the district attorney for criminal fraud charges. So fight it, Grant screamed. I can't fight facts, Grant, and I'm not going to lose my license defending a sinking ship. I sent your file to the public defender's office. Good luck. Grant dropped the receiver. It dangled by the cord, swaying back and forth. He was alone. No wife, no mistress, no company, no lawyer. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out the bottle of Macallan 25. He poured a glass, his hand shaking. He took a sip. It tasted like ash. He looked around the office. He had built this. He had clawed his way up from nothing. He refused to let them take it. He refused to let Mara win. He slammed the glass down. She wants a fight, he whispered, his eyes bloodshot and manic. I'll give her a show. The morning of the final hearing, the sun finally broke through the clouds over Seattle, making the wet pavement glitter. Outside the King County Courthouse, a media circus had assembled. Word had leaked that an Ellington was involved in a public brawl, and the paparazzi were hungry. Grant arrived in a yellow taxi. His BMW had been repossessed the night before. Curiously, the lease was held by a bank recently acquired by Ellington Global. He pushed through the crowd of reporters, looking unraveled. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He clutched a briefcase containing nothing but blank paper and a few printed emails he hoped would prove Mara was unstable. He sat at the defendant's table alone. The public defender hadn't shown up. He was sweating, despite the chill in the room. Then the doors swung open, and the room went silent. The Ellington entourage entered like royalty. First came the security detail, then Arthur Penhaligon, looking serene and deadly in a three-piece suit, then Preston Ellington, walking with the heavy stride of a king, and finally, Mara. She was breathtaking. She wore a cream-colored silk suit that looked like armor. She walked with a grace and power that filled the room, removing her oversized sunglasses to reveal eyes that were clear and utterly devoid of fear. But the real statement wasn't just her appearance. It was her arrival. Through the courtroom windows, visible to the entire gallery, a massive, matte black Mercedes G63 AMG with a red interior was being parked in the judge's reserved loading zone. The personalized plate read, Karma. Judge Marilyn Stone banged her gavel. Docket number 429201, Ellington vs. Grant. She looked at Grant's empty table. Mr. Grant, where is your counsel? I am representing myself, Your Honor, Grant stammered. A ripple of laughter went through the gallery. Arthur Penhaligon stood up. Your Honor, we are asking for a complete annulment of the prenuptial agreement on the grounds of fraudulent inducement. We are also asking for full spousal support and punitive damages. Objection! Grant shouted, jumping to his feet. She's an Ellington. She's worth millions. She pretended to be poor for 5 years. That's the real fraud. Mara stood up then. She walked to the center of the courtroom, facing the bench. I didn't conceal anything, Your Honor, she said, her voice clear. I simply didn't flaunt it. I wanted a partner who loved me, not my name. Grant never asked about my family, because he was too busy talking about himself. She turned to face Grant. The issue isn't my money. It's his. We have submitted Exhibit A, bank records showing Mr. Grant transferred $3.2 million to a shell company in the Cayman Islands on October 10th. Judge Stone flipped through the file, her eyebrows shooting up. Mr. Grant, Is this your signature on the transfer? Grant froze. It was for business expansion. It wasn't personal. It was transferred from joint savings without consent, Arthur interjected smoothly. That is theft of marital property. Judge Stone didn't hesitate. I am granting the motion to void the prenup. I am ordering an immediate freeze of all your assets pending a forensic audit. She banged the gavel. But we aren't done, Arthur said. He held up an evidence bag containing the check for $5,000 Grant had given Mara weeks ago. Mr. Grant valued his wife at $5,000. He told her to leave with nothing. My client would like to return the gesture. Mara walked over to Grant's table. She looked down at him with pity, not hate. I bought your debt, Grant, she said softly. Grant stared at her. What? The bank that held your penthouse mortgage, the bank that held your office lease, the bank that owned your car. I bought the portfolio this morning. I own your house. I own your office. I own the suit on your back. And I'm calling the loans due immediately. Grant's mouth opened, but no sound came out. You have 30 days to vacate, Mara said, echoing the words he had used on her. But honestly, I'd prefer if you were gone by the weekend. I have decorators coming in. She dropped an envelope on his table and walked away. The gallery erupted in applause. Grant opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a foreclosure notice and a single check. It was for $5,000. The memo line read, "For the movers." The weeks following the court verdict were not a slow decline for Grant. They were a free fall. An hour after the gavel fell, Grant took a taxi to the Spire building. He needed to get inside, to find a loophole, to salvage something. He marched to the glass lobby doors and tapped his key fob. Beep, beep, red light. Access denied. Mr. Grant, a voice called out. It was Henry, the doorman Grant had ignored for 5 years. Henry stood with his hands clasped, a faint, satisfied glint in his eye. Management has updated the tenant list. You are no longer on it. I live here, Grant shouted, slamming his hand against the glass. Actually, sir, Henry pointed toward the alley, your personal effects have been removed. They are on the curb by the dumpster. I believe it's supposed to rain. Grant sprinted around the corner. There, on the dirty concrete, sat 10 cardboard boxes. His expensive Italian suits were gone, seized as assets. All that remained were his old gym clothes and paperback books. Grant? He spun around to see Kylie standing there, wearing oversized sunglasses and looking at the boxes with disdain. Kylie, thank God, Grant gasped. Look, I need a place to crash, just until I liquidate some stocks. I can fix this. Kylie took a step back, sneering. You don't have any stocks, Grant. The audit froze everything. You're liable for millions. I just need time. I'm not here to help you, she said coldly. I came for my Cartier bracelet, but the doorman said it was seized as marital property. You owe me, Grant. I owe you. Grant laughed, a broken sound. I lost my wife, my house, and my company for you. You lost them because you're a fraud, Kylie spat, and I'm not going down with you. She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving him alone as the Seattle rain began to pour. Grant sat on a wet box, finally understanding exactly how heavy nothing felt. 6 months later. The gala for the Ellington Foundation was the event of the season. Mara stood at the podium in a midnight blue gown, radiating a quiet power that captivated the room. She was no longer the shadow in the kitchen. She was the light of the city. You did good, kid, Preston said later, handing her a sparkling water. It feels right, Mara smiled. The ledger is balanced. Preston cleared his throat. Speaking of ledgers, we filled that vacancy at the Tacoma distribution hub, the entry-level forklift position. Mara raised an eyebrow. Oh? We hired a guy with prior logistics experience. He's on the night shift. Minimum wage, garnishing 40% for debt repayment. He has a very strict supervisor named Brenda. Does he know it's an Ellington warehouse? He figured it out when he saw the name on his paycheck. Preston smirked. But he didn't quit. He couldn't afford to. 5 miles south, inside the cavernous Ellington Global Warehouse, the night shift was in full swing. The air smelled of diesel and sweat. Grant wiped grime from his forehead. He was wearing a neon safety vest over a stained t-shirt, his hands blistered from manual labor. "Hey, new guy!" Brenda, a terrifying floor manager, barked. "You stacked pallet 4B wrong. Restack it, now!" "I'm coming," Grant muttered, his back aching. As he lifted a heavy box, he caught a glimpse of the breakroom TV. The news was on. There was Mara, cutting a ribbon at the gala, smiling and triumphant. The headline read, "Mara Ellington, the heart of the empire." Grant stared at the screen. He had wanted to marry into the Ellington family more than anything. In a cruel twist of fate, he had gotten his wish. He was part of the machine now, just at the very bottom, sweeping the floors of the empire his wife had built. He hoisted the box onto his shoulder, the weight of his karma pressing down on him, and got back to work. This story serves as a powerful reminder that true worth is never found in bank accounts or job titles, but in how we treat the people who stand by our side. Grant was a man who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. He mistook Mara's humility for weakness and her kindness for subservience. In his blind pursuit of status, he discarded the only genuine asset he had, a loyal partner. Karma is rarely swift, but in this case, it was precise. Grant's downfall wasn't just about losing money. It was about being forced to inhabit the very life he had mocked. Mara's victory wasn't in her wealth, but in her dignity. She proved that the strongest power is often the one that doesn't need to shout to be heard. If you enjoyed this story of dramatic justice and the ultimate karma for a cheating husband, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good revenge story, and subscribe so you never miss out on our next drama-filled episode. What would you have done if you were Mara? Let me know in the comments below.